Hello, my name is Rick Durst, and I'd like to take the next 5 minutes to build a framework, a global missional framework around the Lord's Prayer. Now, many of us have heard that we shouldn't call it the Lord's Prayer. We should call it the Disciples' Prayer. Well, why is that? Well, in the context in which Jesus teaches this prayer, the disciples, the 12, had asked Jesus for a prayer. Why'd they do that? I think they liked his praying, of course, but there's a little bit of extra note in there also that John the Baptist had given his disciples a prayer to mark them as his disciples. And the 12 wanted Jesus to mark them with a prayer that they were his disciples. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come and your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Those are the opening words of the Lord's Prayer. And in it, the disciples' prayer invokes God as Father, as Abba Father. So the disciples' mark Jesus wants on us is that we be in personal relationship, moment by moment, day in, day out, with the living God in his name. Hallowed be your name. The Apostle Paul explains the master plan of evangelism and discipleship by citing from the prophetic promise that's found in Joel 2:13, and then asks 3 questions. Joel says, "For everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved." Everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. 3 questions. How then will they call on him in whom they've never heard? Number 2, and how are they to hear without someone preaching? Number 3, and how are they to preach unless they're sent? Romans 10:13 through 15. Hallowed be your name. Jeff Moody is an Old Testament professor at California Baptist University, and he makes a distinction between Christ as potentiator and Christ as potentate. Potentiators are used as chemical reagents so that the desired outcome of the mixing of chemicals will come out. In the food industry, potentiators are added as food to the food in order to enhance the taste to the desired dish. However, Christ is not a condiment that we add to make our lives more flavorful. He's a potentate whose name is to be hallowed. His name is hallowed when you and I promptly obey all his words. His name is not hallowed whenever we are less than fully obedient to all he commanded. Do you remember in Deuteronomy chapter 32, just hours before the death of Moses, Deuteronomy 32, verse 51, God explains that the reason that Moses and Aaron are not going to go in the promised land is because they did not lift up the holiness of the name of the Lord even before Israel. These were at the waters of Meribah. So now, when nothing is lacking in the fullness of our obedience to the words of Jesus, his name is hallowed before the watching world, and his name becomes famous. Now, let's reflect a little more deeply on hallowing his name. For if we do, then the people around us, the nations around us, will do what Zechariah said. We have heard that God is with you. And then they're asked, like Peter said, to make a defense for the hope that is in us. The prophet of the exile to Babylon, Ezekiel, uses this idea of hallowed be your name multiple times, 4 times at least in his prophetic works. Let me give you an example. Ezekiel 20:41. I will accept you as a sweet aroma when I bring you out from the peoples and gather you out of the countries where you've been scattered. I will be hallowed in you before the nations. To pray the Lord's Prayer is to accept and walk in covenant before the eyes of the nations. Ezekiel 28:22. When I execute judgment in Israel and am hallowed in her, then they shall know that I'm the Lord. Verse 25. When I have gathered the house of Israel from the peoples, among whom they were scattered, and manifested my holiness in them, in the sight of the nations, hallowed be thy name. Hallowed be your name. The Lord must be named. The demons don't want him named because it makes them tremble. The world doesn't want him named because it brings embarrassment and conviction on them. Ezekiel 39:25 and 27. You know these words. I am jealous for my holy name. Listen to the whole context. And when I am hallowed in Israel, in the sight of many nations. So what Jesus wants from us, hallowed be your name, is for us to do that in obedience to him before our neighbors and before the nations so they can call upon his name. Francis Schaeffer in 1974 wrote a book, Before the Watching World, and that's exactly what's going on here. That's the intention. As we hallow his name, the watching world sees the beauty bestowed by that name, and they want in. So what action should we take? We need to repent, and I'm talking to myself too. We need to repent and reconsecrate our discipleship. No more using Christ and Christianity as mere moral therapy to renew our own endeavors. Christ is neither a condiment to flavor our lives nor a potentiator to enhance our schemes, but rather a potentate whose name is above all and whose will and word are to be heard and adhered to promptly and to the full. For then the nations will know his name and call upon him